The February 21st Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board meeting. I would confirm that we have a quorum. And I assume you have all this, meeting agenda. There are a couple of things we're going to be adding, but they're all in the business session up front, so I don't think we're changing the body of the applications or public hearings. Meeting notes. You all received Jim's meeting notes. Are there any questions, comments?
I move we accept them.
Thank you. Edna, can I have a second, please? Second. Craig, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Next up is the approval of the February 6th draft minutes. Everybody have a chance to look at them? Anybody find anything they'd like to correct? If so, it would be a first, as Gretchen does such a thorough job for us. So if you have no comments or corrections or additions, could I have a motion to accept the draft? Motion Michael, second. Edna, all those in favor? There are no abstentions or objections. Okay. Jim, we let everybody know last month that we might have to make some changes to the schedule for 2023. So do you want to propose what you think we could do?
Sure. So I noticed that when it's at the original schedule, we actually have a meeting set for July 3rd, which is between, it's a Monday, so we have the July 4th on Tuesday, so it's kind of settled in there between Sunday and July 4th on a Tuesday. So my thought was that maybe we should move that to the 5th, which would be a Wednesday. I'm not sure a lot of people are going to be up for a meeting on Monday between the weekend and July 4th.
Any objections to moving it to the 5th of July? Well, let's talk about them all and then we'll make a motion to change them based on, we do accept them and approve them, so I think we should motion to change them. So you want to move on to the next one?
Yep, the only other one was August 21st. Unfortunately, again, this year I couldn't time it well. I will be out of town. I can make it back because it's a very long drive. So I was just wondering if we wanted to move that date, possibly schedule another week, cancel it.
I think Kim is signaling her willingness to step in.
That's my hope.
If you still want to have it on your regular schedule, I know it's around the fair time, so I don't know if that impacts it, but if you need, I'm available then to help out.
I guess I prefer to keep it if we can, rather than to try and move it to another week. If that's okay with everybody? With Kim's help? Okay. And we can be mindful of how we're scheduling big projects as we move forward, looking toward that date. Okay, so we really are only then talking about rescheduling the July meeting from the 3rd to the 5th. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. I would like to take a moment to welcome Brian Tam, who has joined the team here as the new zoning administrator. So any of you who have applications coming in the future, Brian will be your first stop. And we're very glad to have him here, and also very pleased to thank Michael once again for stepping up to the plate and carrying us and doing such a good job. So you have my heartfelt gratitude, and I think the gratitude of everybody at this table and probably everybody out there as well. So for those of you who don't, I mean, I know you all appreciate how difficult the job is, but Michael has done it repeatedly, and he does it strictly as a volunteer, which is really pretty incredible as a public citizen. So he deserves an awful lot of gratitude from all of us, and you can't thank him enough.
Good support, that's good.
Well, that's good to hear. Last up, I want to bring something to the attention of the planning board, and that is, you may recall we had an application come in from Christopher Hines for a pool house. And Mark has been in touch with me and is interested in securing the services of Charles Birnbaum from Cultural Landscape Foundation. And we really need to make a formal recommendation, and that, and they're willing to fund it, they're willing to bring him in, and I think it's a good idea, but we'd like a motion to ask Charles Birnbaum to be a consultant on that project.
So moved.
Thank you, Mark.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That just allows us to officially and efficiently cover how we handle escrow and how we bring them in. So, thank you. New applications. Leslie Korzenik, 45 Kelly Street. A site plan and special use permit to construct a deck, stairs, and patio and repair front porch. So if you'd like to come up and we can put your application up, and if you'd explain to us what you're looking to do.
Sure. Hi, my name is Will. I'm representing my mother, Leslie, who's the owner of the property. We are wanting to fix up the stairs on our front porch, which are rotting out. We are also here on this section of the house, hoping to put a small back deck, just enough for a table and a couple of chairs. And then just in this little spot where the stairs will come down off the deck, we're hoping to build a little bluestone patio just to make things look neat. And we're all in support of keeping everything very minimal and historically accurate. So, that's it. Any questions?
Again, comments?
So this is a historic house on Scenic Road, and as we discussed in the conference meeting, will be a topic of discussion amongst the board. Depending on what's done, a demolition permit may be needed. I wasn't entirely sure on some of the
I don't
words.
think we plan to demo anything. We're only adding a deck in the back.
You're not taking out anything that exists.
No, nothing exists.
Then essentially, given that, I think the site visit will help kind of define what's going on here, but being that it is in the Rhinebeck overlay, as we all know, there's flexibility in zoning, but there's also considerations related to historic preservation and consistency with the neighborhood. That's really all I have.
Planning board members.
I have a question. You mentioned a bluestone patio.
Yeah, that would just be very small, and it would just go here in sort of the corner of the house.
So that's not drawn in place yet, right? The bluestone patio?
No, I don't think that's like on there, but it doesn't exist, so.
So would it go up as far as?
No, it would just be in the corner here.
Oh, in the corner.
Yeah.
I think we'll want to see that depicted on the site plan.
Okay.
And are you adding any exterior light fixtures or anything like that?
Not adding, just going with the ones that are currently there.
And no landscaping or any additional improvements?
Nothing pertaining to this project.
Other planning board members?
Only question I have is the deck natural wood or composite?
It's going to be natural wood.
And I didn't quite understand what was going on at the front of the house.
There's a porch on the front of the house here, and the stairs are running off.
And it
so-
looks like you have two walls.
Well, yeah, kind of. So coming off here, this isn't really a wall. It's more just some stones sort of lining the garden bed. But this is more of an actual wall here.
And that's not gonna, that part's not gonna change?
No, that's not going to change.
You said the stairs are really rotted, and you're gonna just replace them in kind?
Yeah.
No
nothing-
change?
No. Just
Looking appearance?
keeping the front porch the same.
Does it have a handrail or anything like that?
It will.
And this is on Kelly Street, approximately where?
So as you're coming past the Morton Library and you're going around the curve, it's the little white house with pink and purple trim right in the middle.
Just across from the fire station?
No, other side of town. So as you're going towards, yeah, so as you're going that way, you're going up the hill, yeah?
Okay.
So it's right like there. Do you know like Barker Ledge? Okay.
I don't know the individual houses that are.
So there's a house here, and there's a house here, and I'm in the middle.
Sounds like you might have a photo in front of the house.
Yeah.
There should be I provided photos at some point in
Let's
this
see what it
process.
is. Jim's gonna check and see what else we can have.
The photos were electronic, right? You just gave me the photos.
I emailed them to you. I can go. I can. Where I don't.
You have the correction?
I'm gonna.
45 days.
While you're looking at, can I just ask a clarification on patios, and correct me if I'm wrong? If someone's adding a patio, if they need to go in the first floor, but if they're doing a site plan, we want to see as much as possible, is that right?
We encourage people to do as much as they can at the same time, because then we see it all together on the application and the site.
Houses are pretty close together where you are, yeah.
I mean, fairly, that's Barbara's house, so my house is to the right. I'm here. Yeah, that's it. So that's, remember when you were asking about the double walls?
Yeah.
There's like a line of stones there. I've fixed all that, it's prettier.
So
Yeah,
Gretchen,
makes
you're gonna verify that we have these, and if not, we'll be in touch.
I'll be in you.
I was gonna say, they're not coming up in my email, but I know I have them in the
I'll
file.
just resend it, right? It's no problem.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm seeing a lot of gravel in front of your house.
That doesn't exist anymore, actually. It only comes, the driveway's only here. This is all grass now.
Nice.
This is an old photo, I mean, Google.
There are no photos from 2012.
Yeah. Changed slightly.
All right, so Gretchen's gonna confirm that she has or doesn't have it, and you two can communicate about that. So
Sure.
we can get, it would be, I think, helpful to have, since you're doing work on the side and around, maybe photographs of all the elevations where you're gonna be doing work.
Sure, yeah.
Okay?
So my only question is regarding amending the site plan. I had an extreme amount of difficulty getting the surveyor who did this to give me his product. It took 2 months. So I'm a little concerned that drawing in the patio is going to take him another 2 months. He's a very difficult guy. I mean, if you guys are okay with that,
Certainly.
that's, I mean, I'm happy. It's really no more than just where the deck is, just from the corner to the stairs. It's just a very small, like 5 by 10 strip.
During the site visit, also typically have you sit down, so you can clearly see where things are kind of big. I think that's also really helpful in the site visit. We'll take pictures, which will also allow us to.
Sounds like you're volunteering.
Yeah,
It sounded like it to me. Okay, all right, let's,
All right, done with me?
no, we're just gonna,
Oh,
I think we're ready to read the draft procedural resolution, and we'll appoint a couple of people to make a site visit, and then you'll know who they are when they call for visits, okay?
Okay, draft procedure resolution for the board's consideration tonight for Leslie Krasenik at 45 Kelly Street in the hamlet of Rhinecliff, accepting the application, supporting documents as added for further review by the planning board, supervisors, and the public, classifying actions type 2 under seeker, scheduling a public hearing for March
21st, actually.
20th.
20th.
March 20th. We will send this on to the CAB for review, the Waterfront Advisory Committee, and PayPac, as well as the County Planning Department. And we need to delegate 2 planning board members to
I'll go.
Dr. Slate.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you guys.
2 or more planning board members.
That's okay.
Well, you're already up on it. May I have a motion to accept the draft procedure? Second?
Second.
Craig, all those in favor? Opposed, abstentions, thank you very much. Next up on the new applications is Wendy Midland, 636 River Road, site plan and special use permit, construction of a 2-story barn and an addition to the home. I think I'd like to start off with turning this over to Jim at this point.
So as the board members probably saw in my memo, unfortunately, when I took a look at the application, I don't believe that what was submitted can actually be reviewed by the board because use is not permitted in the zoning district. Based on what was submitted in the write-up, the number of employees would not qualify as a home occupation. We're actually making it more of an office, and an office is not permitted in the zoning district. So unfortunately, I think what needs to happen is we have to send this back to the zoning administrator to take a look at it, to determine what can be done in the zoning district and how we can make this compatible. I don't think the board can do something we don't think is permitted in the district.
So I'll open it up to the planning board for questions they might have of Jim regarding his thoughts on this.
I think what we really need is a detailed narrative, specifically what they really use the property for. Given the addition of the house and fairly large garage, second floor that was going in there. The narrative, when I first reviewed this, I missed that in the narrative. Reference to it being a realty business being run there. And I just looked over the different applications for the permits, things like that, and I didn't pick that up. Although I did see that given at the top of the garage, there's a third operating 2 rooms for quick service bedrooms, and given our zoning law, they therefore have to consider that, which is why we're here before us now for a special use permit for a guest house, especially in the site plan. If the use is to be a realty office, that is a professional office, and it's not permitted in the R10 zoning district. A home occupation 2 could be permitted in that district, but it is limited to the owner of the property and one employee. It can't be anything more than that. And I think there was some discussion or something in the application that there would be one employee and one assistant.
Yeah, so at least one employee and one assistant.
So there would be 3 non-residents there.
Minimally.
With minimally, which means it cannot be considered a home occupation. It should fall under the use of a professional office, and that's not allowed in any of the residential districts outside of Rhinebeck in the town of Rhinebeck. I'm not sure if the village does, but it would not be allowed in the R10 district, and that's what I think Jim's referring to. We need to establish exactly what additional use is being proposed for this property.
Also, for the benefit of the planning board members, just to understand why this is being routed back to the zoning enforcement officer. The planning board does not have authority to interpret the zoning law. So the planning board doesn't have the authority to make decisions about whether something's in compliance or not. So the proper routing for this is to go back to the zoning enforcement officer, who is the party that makes those decisions. And that way also, if the applicants disagree with the determination that's made by the zoning enforcement officer, there's a route for them to appeal that decision to the zoning board of appeals, when that route would not be available if the decision got made at this board.
And would we tonight make a motion to send it back to the zoning administrator?
Yes. And I would ask Jim to send it back with some discussion that will allow the zoning administrator to make a determination in accordance with the questions that the board has raised at this meeting.
And that then leaves aside for potential future discussion any other issues involving the application, like the bulk of the
Yes.
accessory.
Because based on the discussion, the application may change.
So there's no discussion on the structures themselves as it stands today.
Well, because as it stands right now, because Jim is telling us that he does not believe that it's an allowable use, and I think Michael is concurring at this point, having looked at it. So that's where I think we are. But I would ask other
Right,
people.
procedurally, what's happening tonight is you're not accepting the application. Okay. So that's why you wouldn't have any discussion on any of the issues that, other issues that would be
So
raised.
essentially, the zoning administrator give us a new determination letter
Yes.
that it meets the zoning.
Other planning board questions? Comments? So, John, the motion would be to not accept it and to refer it back to the zoning administrator.
That's right.
I move that we do that.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second.
Michael? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? So you've met Mr. Bryant, and it will be going back to him for a review.
You can say something, or?
You can say something, but it's nothing that we can deliberate or comment on this evening because we haven't accepted the application.
Yeah, I understand. I think the narrative needs to be changed because my real estate office is already in the village. It's not going to be a real estate office.
Well, it's now, back in your court to look at that and to reconcile what your intentions are with what's been submitted through the zoning administrator's office. Okay. Very good. Thank you. We'll see you, I'm sure, in the future. Okay. The last new application before us this evening is Wireless Edge Verizon, 3866 Route 9G, site plan and special use permit. And you introduce yourself and tell us what you'd like to do. We're happy to hear from you.
Good evening. My name is Michael Sheridan. I'm an attorney with Snyder & Snyder. We are attorneys for the applicants Wireless Edge and Verizon Wireless. We're proposing a 150-foot monopole, monopine tree design, which will have branches extending up to 155 feet on a large property, which will provide coverage for Verizon Wireless that is lacking. There's an existing coverage gap in the area. This proposed tower will provide that coverage. It will be located in a 75 by 75 foot compound and an 8-foot fence. It will provide for Verizon Wireless on the tower and allow for additional co-location for up to 4 additional co-locators. It will be set along a tree line on the property that will assist it into blending in, as it will be a tree pole monopine. It meets all the setbacks on the property according to your code. We're here tonight to answer any questions. I'm here with John Arthur from Wireless Edge. If you have any questions tonight, we're hoping to move this project along expeditiously as the coverage is necessary. As you know, in this area, there is a lack of coverage. I know from tonight driving in here, trying to make a call, I was unable to do so. So I can tell you from personal experience that additional coverage is necessary in this area. Again, here to answer any questions, and also, to the extent that we can move this along, schedule a public hearing so we can come back, get any input from the public, and move this along as expeditiously as possible. The final thing we'd like to mention is that next to visibility, we submitted a report showing that there should be limited visibility of the tower, and we'd also like to schedule a balloon test. We have a recommended date of March 11th, and we'd like to schedule that now, so when we come back, we can have a visibility analysis.
Jim, can I kick it off?
Sure. So we had a good discussion at the pre-con meeting about a number of the issues and items that would likely come up in the discussion related to this proposal. I'm not going to go through every item in my memo tonight, but in general, I do think that the tower height, the location and setting will be something to be discussed, as well as the design of the tower. The code does require things like blending in and making sure it's camouflaged in at 150 feet. Given the existing tree line in the area that might be, I don't know, maybe 50, 60 feet high, this will go obviously above the tree line. I'm not sure as a planning consultant, the branches proposed are going to camouflage it. I think it might be less so if they weren't there, but that's my opinion. Things like the design, I think are something to be discussed. Just kind of thinking about where the height will be. Obviously, the visual assessment is something to be looked at as well. And regarding that, I think that the planning board should request the services of George James to look at the visual impact. He is a specialist in that area, I'm not. We're also recommending another specialist to take a look as well, like Melody mentioned in that. We are on a historic property, so I think phase 1A and 1B should be undertaken. I don't think that's been done yet. That's something we can talk about. There are lots of criteria related to the communications facility and tower. There's a lot of material provided by the applicant that we are going to kind of run through everything word for word, but we have taken a look at a lot of it. We are outside the wetland buffer, so that's good. That was one concern we had, but that is being confirmed as outside the wetland buffer. So I don't think we have an issue there. And my only other comment is that we did mention at the pre-conference meeting that the ORP zoning district just down the road actually was rezoned by the town board last year for cell towers. We obviously cannot dictate where people go with their private investments, but I did want to know if that was considered, if it was looked at, if we wanted to discuss that, if there was any consideration about looking at placing this in the ORP, where the town board has specifically rezoned for cell towers to go, just about maybe 10 months ago.
Knowing that there was consideration by Verizon Wireless, as you may or may not be aware, the property we're on is at a higher elevation, property down the road is at a lower elevation, so the coverage needs for Verizon would not be met at that property down the road, which is
What's the difference in elevation?
I do not know that off the top of my head, I apologize. It's on the plans, but I think it's, 50, 70 feet, something to that.
It's probably about right.
About 60 feet.
60 feet.
So those are kind of my high-level preliminary comments.
Planning board questions?
I'm not familiar with any species of evergreen in the state of New York that goes to 150 feet mature. I mean, this is California, evergreen's not native here, neither is giant sequoia. How can you claim that this is going to camouflage this? That's going to stand probably up as much as 80 feet or more above the tree canopy in that area. I think, I understand there may be a need here, but I think to try and say this is going to camouflage this, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. And it's going to look ridiculous if you're trying to make it one of these stony pine trees.
Well, I think the idea is that this area needs the coverage. And because of the way the technology works, you need to be at a certain height to be able to provide the coverage to a broad area. And the way that it works is you need a tower that's at a certain height. And what happens is the tower sticks up, you're right, it does stick up above the trees, which is necessary for it to provide the coverage needed. And then how do you camouflage it best to make it blend in? And this is one of the ways that is commonly used all over the place. I'm sure you've seen them elsewhere.
I've seen them, it does not blend in at all.
This is one of the ways that is used to blend it in. People have different opinions on it, but again, this is not something, ideally, this is something that is going to go there, provide the coverage necessary to the people driving by, so they have no issues with coverage, no problems with connecting, and it's something that is not something they're driving by and staring at, it's something they're appreciating because they're getting the coverage needed.
I think that's fine for you to appreciate it and you get the coverage they need, but I think it's somewhat disingenuous to tell the public that you're going to love the looks of this and it's going to blend in. It's not going to blend in. Maybe in necessity, just the way telephone poles all around the streets are a necessity. Obviously, it's more beautiful if they weren't there, but they have to be there. It just seems to me to try to tell us that this is somehow going to blend in when we know it's not going to blend in. But it may be a necessity for safety and also for communication reasons. But please don't try to tell us this is going to blend in, because this is not going to
What we
blend in.
call it camouflage, so that's
It's not camouflage either.
it's camouflage more than,
Well, I think,
it's not a
if I-
camouflaging technique used for this tower.
Well, I think that's precisely why the suggestion that was made earlier, which is to retain the services of George James, who is an expert that we've worked with before, who will look at those kinds of questions and provide us with input as to the best way we can proceed, at least visually. We'd also like to bring in Ron Grave, who is a radio frequency expert, as our consultant. obviously we'll work as quickly as we can and efficiently to move it along, knowing that we need to do that. But I asked the planning board if there are other questions they want to raise.
I have a question. It looks like you're setting up for multi-carrier long-term, correct?
Correct.
And the benefit of a tower that has multi-carriers is
Well, the benefit of the tower with multi-carriers is you don't need more than one tower in an area. Yeah, you're able to provide for all the different carriers. That's the goal.
And is there a limitation on the height if you want to service allow for multiple carriers? There's obviously a limitation because the further you go down, the less coverage, right? And so I'm assuming that's where you're basing your heights off of, is not only does Verizon have the top coverage, but allowing for multiple carriers to be able to join that tower?
That's the idea. I can't speak for other carriers here in connection with Verizon's application, so I can only speak to Verizon Wireless's application.
Okay.
But are you saying that the lowest antenna that's shown there would not be suitable for Verizon?
I'm saying that Verizon has come and asked for the antennas at this site, and that's going to provide the most coverage for them in this area. And that's what I can speak to.
And the antenna themselves, must they look like that? The antenna that are affixed to the pole?
Meaning, I mean, the idea is the branches, there'll be branches, as you can see, the branches go, extend beyond where the antennas are. And then the antennas are usually either colored green, or sometimes they put socks on them that mirror the branch look.
I'm
So the
interested in,
antennas would blend in.
I'm interested in the antenna themselves, not the so-called tree. I'm just wondering if there are any size alternatives or, design differences possible for the antenna.
That's, there's a question I've never had before, but my knowledge of the antennas is that the antenna manufacturers create them different ways. There are different size antennas that serve different purposes. So not all the antennas, as you can see, some of them are smaller. The one to the right, the center one, is a smaller antenna. The one in the center is taller, and it's dictated by the technology and the antenna manufacturers. And then Verizon uses the specific antenna for a specific purpose on the top.
What do you expect the service like at this tower to be?
I can't speak to that. I think if Verizon wants to put in a tower and provide coverage as long as they can. I could get an answer, but they want to have it here as long as necessary.
But if it's obsolete in 7 years, is there some sort of plan or it's removable?
I think that's something that, it's normally towers that are obsolete, I think sometimes just built into codes that give bonds and things that allow for the removal of the tower.
Good evening, John Arthur, President of Rural Wireless Edge. So the service life of towers is typically about 50 years. When we write our leases, it's about a 50-year lease. If you go back to when we started cellular, these towers have been in operation for 20, 30 years already, and there's really no end to the site. So a typical steel structure that's galvanized has a lifetime of about 30 to 50 years before it needs to be retreated or repainted or replaced. But that doesn't mean the site necessarily goes away.
But there's no existing infrastructure anywhere in the area that's going to meet the need.
There's none.
Is this proposed to be lit in some way?
No.
Not for aircraft or anything like that?
No. There'll be small lighting at the compound, which will only be used when maintenance, during maintenance. Otherwise, it'll be unlit.
I know you've reached out to the FAA, can you just let us know the status of that, any approvals or review?
I believe it's in review, expected shortly, but.
And the close proximity of the two airports is not a consideration?
It is our understanding it's not an issue. We will provide that information.
people need to see that.
And I also add, so we apply to the FAA for determination, we do that for every site. We do advanced analysis when it's not. There is a tool provided by the FCC where you put your site information in, and it will tell you if you even need to register with the FAA. And according to that, you do not. So the airports nearby will consider distance to runways, glide slope, things like that, and we're clear of everything.
Using, let us say, 2 towers instead of 1 tower to allow the towers to be shorter.
Well, I think at this point, Verizon is looking for the coverage that's provided from the antennas that would be at that height. That is sort of, I would dictate the height of the tower. Because Verizon Wireless uses.
Right, I'm asking is it possible to achieve this coverage? But a shorter tower than one very long.
I'm not an RF engineer, but based on coverage and the fact that topography impacts coverage is provided, the lower the antennas, the coverage would be different. And this is what Verizon Wireless has requested for their coverage.
What is the radius that this height provides that was unachievable at this lower elevation? Like, how much more are they gaining of coverage by having that height?
I'm not an RF engineer, and I don't have that information off the top of my head, but the coverage provided, that will be provided, was submitted to you in a report, and it shows the area of coverage that Verizon Wireless will get from this tower, which includes, out towards the bridge, down 9G. So,
Do you know what the lowest antenna height is?
yeah, it's 106.
So presumably at 106 feet, there's obviously still no coverage, because that antenna wouldn't exist otherwise, right?
That's the idea, is that there would be some coverage provided from that, which would allow somebody to co-locate on the tower.
So it's roughly around the elevational difference of the other property that we were discussing before.
But that coverage is not the coverage that necessarily Verizon Wireless is looking for, and we don't know what carrier would be at that elevation, and they may have different needs, different requirements, so I can't speak to the coverage that's going to be provided at that level, so I don't know the carrier or what their coverage needs are. What we're here tonight for is that Verizon Wireless has specified their coverage needs, and those coverage needs will be met by the antennas where they're located on the tower.
Okay, so for plenty of members, the questions are good questions because Verizon, what they're entitled to do under federal law is to be able to close the gaps in coverage. There should be materials that are part of the application package that in the RF report that will show you where the gaps are. And Mr. Sheridan speaking about the coverage that Verizon wants, that's not necessarily exactly what filling the gap is. The company may want to cover areas that are larger than that. So you'll have to take a look at the RF report that's been provided to answer those questions, and we're going to look into engaging an RF engineer that will be a consultant to the board to help you answer those questions and interpret the RF data that's been given.
One thing I will say for this board to take into consideration is we don't, so eventually there's going to be a phone tower in this area, right? It's a broken down coverage for everyone. If we don't allow one at a suitable height that will allow them to put multiple carriers on it, we're going to end up with multiple levels of infrastructure throughout the surrounding town. So instead of having one of these other things, we're going to have 5 of these other things. Okay, and then on top of that, the infrastructure building can operate. And so, if they do bring it down to the lowest level, then the people below that level, it's not even suitable for the other carriers that are to buy on that. And so then what we have is, again, we're going to have another site just like this down the road for an AT&T, for whatever. And so there are some of the things just to keep in mind that it's not just one carrier that is involved with this situation, which I do like about the application, that it could serve multiple, but it does come with a hindrance that we are going to be able to hold height. But then we're going to have one tower compared to multiple towers.
Or presumably it can be in a location that's less visible from the road, so that it accomplishes that, but, is a little more objective
Yeah, there's a give and take here a little bit on it. So it's interesting, and I think the RF will be really nice to look at. I haven't seen that report myself, but I think it's like obviously the first one to build the tower gets all the candy, aka this Verizon, right? And everyone else kind of picks from the wrappers, and that's where we'll get.
So you'll see in the zoning law that, so there are two, what you want to try to do with this application is bring together two goals that, and one goal is that, you know, as a, in terms of the federal, this is regulated by the federal government in part, okay? And there's a policy that's been adopted at the federal level that says that, you know, as a nation, we've decided that we want to support building out mobile networks, and we want to build out the infrastructure that's necessary to expand and strengthen our mobile networks. And because of that, there are certain things that are put into place that local boards have to follow. And that was done to encourage the build out of the network. At the same time, the government chose not to take away all local governmental authority over these projects. They chose to leave some authority in the hands of local boards. And you have set forth in Section 1 of the special use permit requirements for telecommunication towers, you'll see what Rhinebeck set forth as the goals, okay? So in Rhinebeck, we want to be able to have our citizens have coverage. That's something that's important. But we also have some other considerations where we want these towers to be as harmonious with the environment as they possibly can. There's a whole list of criteria that we want to see, we want to reach for in reviewing these applications. So those are the two things that you want to keep in mind as you go forward.
They're not terribly compatible.
Well, it depends, and you know, there are varying degrees. You know, there have been varying degrees of success in terms of reaching. Most communities want to try to marry those two criteria, and so you know, the key is to keep the criteria and the goals of your zoning law in mind, and then you know, you'll as a planning board, you'll have to see what comments come in from the public, and then to work with the applicant to try to reach that goal. And there are other alternatives. I mean, this is the opening alternative that the applicant's making in the application. And just as with other applications that come before you, there are sometimes changes in the design of the project as you go forward to try to bring that project closer into accord with the zoning law and the government's plan. And that's, you want to try to do the same thing here.
We were told just about a month ago that one of the solutions for closing this gap was through these microcells that they take advantage of existing infrastructure and are lower profile and more widely distributed. So how does that approach contrast with what you're suggesting?
Not exactly what you're talking about. There's a couple of different things you could be talking about, but one of the things is you still need a central point that really is providing coverage for the broad area there. This is something that's, you know, the way it's designed, the way it's set up, it's going to be able to provide coverage, not only in a broad area, but it's going to be able to provide coverage during power outages. Most likely all the carriers will set up some sort of backup power outages. Some of the smaller areas, they don't have the equipment or the infrastructure or the backup to be able to really work at a time when more and more people are relying on cellular coverage, which is when you have a big storm, the power goes out, the carriers can still operate using their facilities at towers like this. On the smaller cells, the smaller things that you might see in a light pole, street pole, they don't have that backup power to provide coverage, not only normally, but really when you need it. And those are smaller areas that once you get off the roads back into neighborhoods, off the main roads, doesn't provide the coverage you need. This provides coverage you need to a wider area and will most likely provide coverage during the time you really need it, which is during power outage after a big storm which seemed to happen.
Mr. Sheridan, would you say that the goal of this tower is primarily to fill a coverage gap versus adding capacity?
This is for a coverage.
I think Jim made a suggestion earlier, which was to consider bringing in George James and additionally to bring in Ron Grafe, who have expertise in the aesthetics and also the radio frequency. What are your feelings about that?
I think it's a very good decision. And we need that.
Also some pictures of ones that exist.
Yeah, let me explain to you what, so Ron Grafe is a radio frequency engineer, and he acts as a big part of his business now is acting as a consultant to planning boards that are reviewing cell tower applications, and he will help you read and understand the RF data that's being given to you, and that would be something that's very valuable. I've found him to be a pretty good communicator in being able to translate that to things that you and I can understand. George James is a planner, but he has a subspecialty in visual assessment, and he was going to do two things for you. I think one of the first things that you want to do, I know that Mr. Sheridan mentioned a balloon test, but I think one of the first things you might want to ask George to do after he takes a look at the application is to make a recommendation about what methodology he thinks is the best methodology for assessing the visual impact of the proposed tower. And then when we get George's opinion, and that can be communicated to the applicant so that the applicant's not spending money to do X and then the planning board ends up asking for Y. So if we can get George engaged and get the materials into his hands, then step one is to get the methodology, and then step two is assessing the results of the analysis that's done pursuant to that methodology.
I'd also really like to see what's being done around the country on this kind of very
I can say that we have engaged the services of George before, and he brings that expertise. You know, he has a very broad view of what alternatives are, and makes the
Yeah, and
having
there
them-
are things being done. There's been a fair amount of creativity that's been brought to the question, and you can also ask the applicant too. They have a lot of experience, and they may be able to bring you alternatives that might be something that would be worth considering.
What's the sequence here? Does the board vote on the recommendation, and then we secure the consent of, or the agreement of the applicants proceed? Is there a particular order in which we should do it?
Well, I think that it would be good for you to make a motion to engage your consultants and get that done. I think you need to have Jim complete his review of the application, and if you can make a decision, hopefully at the next meeting, about whether the application is in a condition to open it up for public hearing. Hopefully, you can have some preliminary information back from these consultants by that time.
Will I make that recommendation? Make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Of course, the cost of these are borne by you through escrow, you understand that? You're in agreement that you can proceed to share your information with both Mr. Grafe and Mr. James?
Yes.
Anything else we need to do tonight?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yes, thank you, and I just want to make sure, can we communicate with Mr. James about?
Well, Jim or John will talk, and we'll figure out a way to reach out to them and loop you in. And then at that point, I think you proceed to work directly with
Yeah,
them.
we have to get them engaged formally, but once we do that, it will be possible to communicate.
Right, and I do understand, I want to share with you that I do understand the necessity to have a balloon test if that's the direction we go sooner rather than later. We know you need to do it before the new bond starts coming.
Correct.
So we have a very accurate understanding of what it's going to look like in the winter,
Correct.
which is going to be very different than what it looks like the summer. So I do understand the timing, and we'll do the best that we can to engage them as quickly as possible and move it along so that we get the best information we both need.
That would be great.
And the board is aware of the shot clock, and that's definitely in our minds. Every effort will be made to try to move this through the process as quickly as we can.
Excellent. Yeah, I just want to make sure if we can communicate with them. I understand your next meeting is March 20th.
Oh, we'll be moving that along much more quickly than that, right? I mean, you're talking
Well,
about.
we'll see, you know, it
Yeah.
depends on what Ron and George
Yeah.
can do for us.
That's your next meeting on March 20th?
It's not our next
It's
meeting.
the next
but
meeting
the
that
next
this
meeting that
application-
This application on the board.
I just want to make sure that when we get to that point, that we have worked with your consultants so we can move forward on getting those
We'll
things.
try to do that, we'll try to do that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll be in touch. That moves us into the public hearing portion of the meeting this evening. And first up, Justin, the application of Justin McLeod, 531 Old Wurtemberg Road, site plan review and special use permit.
The one without all the application documents is kind of better. I think that's just, okay. That's what we're doing. Perfect, that's right. So good evening, Darren Davidovich from the Art Building on behalf of Justin and Kate McLeod, the owners of 531 Old Wurtemberg Road. And we're here tonight to talk about an 11.06 acre parcel that's located at the intersection of Wurtemberg Road, Old Wurtemberg Road, Primrose Hill Road, and Schultz Hill Road. Something that was previously approved, the property's in the RC5 zone, and it was previously approved for site plan and special permit in order to redevelop the site and essentially convert some historic barns to different uses. So restore and convert a series of very closely assembled historic barns to different uses than they originally had. And maybe Jim, you can just zoom in a little bit, it's kind of small. Given, although the parcel's 11 acres in size, most of the development is concentrated in this small area here. And just to take you very quickly through the buildings on the site, there's a main house here. There are 3 historic barns, a very small barn right here, a much larger barn here, which is in the process of being converted to a detached accessory dwelling. There's what was a former coop here, and those are the historic structures, and then there's a 4th or 5th building actually being recreated there. That was a non-historic run-in shed that's being rebuilt at the moment, and that's going to be a form of a pool house. And what we're here tonight to talk about simply is the building, which we call Building 5, that's highlighted there in yellow, the former coop, which is a one-room barn. It's 269 square feet. And what our clients would like to do, although it was previously approved as a pool house, what they'd like to do is put a full kitchen in it. So when they're entertaining at the pool, they have cooking facilities there, refrigerators, that kind of thing. Flip through, I can take you quickly through.
So is it right here?
Yeah, that's all. And then I think if we just move forward, I can take you quickly through the floor plan. So like I said, okay. So 269 square feet, and like I said, a single room. What we're proposing is to add some cabinetry along the north wall here, a little more cabinetry along the east wall, and a large central island in the middle of the room. So once you factor all those things in, we're left with about 150 square feet of just open floor area in there. That's divided up just sort of around the building at that point. And then we have some photographs. This helps orient you a little bit better. This is that small barn that I had mentioned. This is the largest of the 3 barns, the one that's currently being converted to a detached accessory dwelling. This is the building we're talking about here, Building 5, and this is a little bit more of a zoomed-in photograph of that. And These photographs were taken probably about 2 months ago, so quite a bit more work has happened on them since. But the concept here was disassemble and rebuild the timber frames, taking out any non-historic timbers, taking out anything that had rotted away, replacing those pieces, reassemble the timber frames, build a skeleton around them, if you will, to house insulation, pipes and wires and that kind of thing, and then reclad the buildings in some weathered barn siding, in such a way that once you went in the building, you could still see the entire timber frame, so that the wall finishes were applied on what they appear to be applied to the original timber frames. And from the outside, the siding appears to be nailed to the original timber frames, with the added benefit that in between you're able to gain some insulation and some enable these buildings to serve the uses they're proposed for. Jump to the next slide. Just the other two elevations of this. So this is looking at the building from the east, and then this is looking at the building from the south. And there are windows and more siding that's not shown in that picture just because the windows haven't arrived yet, and it didn't make sense to put the siding and the trim on until those windows were installed.
But there are double glass doors there, right?
There are. There's a series of glass doors and transom windows above here. And then this is not the inside of the building we're here tonight to talk about. This is actually the inside of the smallest of the barns, the white building that was in the photograph. But we put these pictures in the presentation just to show what a finished product would look like. So here you can see the restored timber frame, you can see the restored barn floors, and then in this building, there's plaster for the wall finish, and that plaster finishes out right at the back plane of the timber frame, so the illusion is that it's applied to the timber frame, which is no longer structural. And in the building we're here tonight to talk about, the proposal is actually to clad the ceiling in reclaimed barn board, with the inside of the barn board showing the way it would have shown had it been the original roof sheeting, let's use the term. And then this is an example of some interior window trim, just so you can see some of the detailing that goes back into these barns. Of course, surrounding it is the plaster finish. And then this last bit is just some of the original submission when we were first before the board to approve the site plan and special permit. So we just included that for the sake of disclosure. One nice thing it does here is it shows us some of the way the timber frame used to look. And of course, these are the original, or at least the way we found them, exteriors that have been modified over the years. But prior to starting, this is what this building looked like. And prior to starting, that's what that timber frame looked like. So this look on the ceiling would be what we're trying to achieve at the end of the day. I thought there was a photo of the interior of the building with the beams wrapped up too. I just skipped over it quickly. There we go. So these two photographs are, again, about 2 months ago. Not a whole lot has changed since then. We've done some electrical rough, done some insulation, but this is the restored timber frame, just wrapped up to protect it from the plaster finishes and things that will come. And we're looking into the building from the south.
One new note, just maybe a minor thing. I just happened to notice that the plans actually had the stamp and sign plan sheets themselves. So obviously that's something that will be done before you can sign off on those. But typically when they come in, they've got an architect or engineer's got the sign.
Our planning board members.
You're talking about the architectural plans or the site plan? Okay.
And I get site visit, I don't know if everyone would like to start with the report on that.
Go ahead.
Thanks. Jen, could you just remind, I think all of us would be helpful to remind us of what the difference is between the original submission and the submission today? Just from the original application to where we are today, this particular use of this So I believe you had like a summer kitchen in there previously?
We did, it's a mistake on my part. What we had submitted to, as a companion document to the original submission was a long PowerPoint presentation. And in each introductory paragraph, we described the intended use of the building, and we called it a pool house. And our illustration showed, if you go to that original submission, part Jim, at the very end of the shorter presentation, the shorter submission. Just looking there, we go, that's good. We had actually shown a sink and just sort of a countertop, knowing that the intent was to do some sort of refrigeration, have some sink in there, at that time, maybe just a coffee pot or something like that. And so not much of a difference in terms of what was intended here, but now that everything's been fleshed out, we're talking a little bit more of a substantial kitchen.
Thank you. That's the problem, because I think today we're commenting on really the difference between the two, which previously improved to where we are today. Darren was very kind and showed Ed and I quite a bit of the property, just a lot of what we've done to not only really just bring it back to its historic nature, from the foundations to a lot of just the wood in general on the outside of these buildings to be aged over, and just so many intricate pieces that they've done to bring the property back to life. I was quite impressed with just particularly this pool house that they brought back in front of us, but it's the appropriate thing to do. But the reason I say that is it's not a huge change when you really look at the facility. They're using the same back walls originally intended. There is not a lot of room in there. There was not a lot of room in there with just the boards on the floor that are going to be going on the floor. They were trying to scurry around them. So to use this for anything other than what it's intended for, I could never see possible. But overall the property and some of the other buildings, it showed us what we should expect in here. And there's another building on the property where you were able to, they're putting in actually the roofing to give the intentions that what this is going to do. Showing the flooring that was put in, I think there's a great deal of care in this entire project. And I had no issue with looking at it. I think it really makes sense. This is approximately 30 feet-ish, I would guess, from the pool. And one thing that there seems to be a lot of these buildings, I think we're going to see more usage in the main house, I think, in a lot of ways. Was one thing we walked away from. So nothing about this really stood out to me other than that there's a great deal of care and just in general for the entire property and bringing it back, but also putting it back together a really well done way. So kudos to not only the homeowner, but to the builder and the people doing the work.
Just to add, not much that I can add to that. I think the pictures speak for themselves. It's work that's being very carefully and very beautifully done.
Any other comments?
I recall seeing this project last summer, and at that time, it was, or it had been, on the National Register as an intact farmhouse. Not really noteworthy for its architectural appeal, for its beauty, but for the historic integrity. And that seems to have been reduced to a series of architectural fragments and parts of other barns that you dragged to the site and nailed onto an exoskeleton wrapping. So I think that that's an unfortunate loss to the historic character of the town. And it's also a very rural and agricultural part of the town. And it seems to be a further suburbanization of that important site. So I think that's maybe a bit misguided.
Well, I appreciate your opinion, and all I can offer is that we've done what we explained we were going to do, and I think everything that was intended is to be done on this site, and that was what was approved.
I think to be clear, the conversation that we're having tonight is about the change to this building, So the approval, whether you like the approval or not, the approval was granted and we're here tonight because of a change. So I think that's what we need to focus on. I appreciate your comments, but I think at this point that ship is sailed, so to speak. If there's no more comments or questions from the planning board, I would open it up to the public. If there are no comments from the public, could I have a motion to close the public
So
hearing?
moved.
Second. Motion by Michael, second by Louise. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Jim, I believe you have an approval resolution.
For the board's consideration tonight, the draft approval resolution for Justin and Kate McLeod, 531 Old Wurtemberg Road, within the RC5 for the modification of the interior of the existing historic structure. Reaffirming the action is type 2 under seeker, for which coordinated environmental quality review was concluded. Based upon review of the submitted information, you find that the proposed work is consistent with the objectives and regulations of Chapter 125. With respect to the special use permit to authorize actually it would just be improvements addition. Find the proposed work and intended use to be consistent with the general standards for special use permits and to grant the special use permit conditioned upon site plan approval. With respect to site plan approval, again asking you to find the work and intended use consistent with Town Code Chapter 125, improve the application inclusive of the materials by the Art Building and Proper Road Area Engineering, DPC dated 10/12/2023, and asking you to authorize the planning board chair to stamp and sign the site plan upon the applicant's satisfaction of the below cited conditions, as well as one that I would add in here, that the sign plans, which would have to be done anyway, but the plans, will be stamped and signed prior to coming into Melody for signature. So,
I have a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
I have multiple seconds, just pick one. I will pull the board. Elise? Aye. Michael?
Aye.
Sean? Craig?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Next up, Catherine Whitman, 16 Old Post Road, site plan review for a proposed single-family home. Good evening, Catherine.
So, this is kind of an update from the last meeting.
Okay.
I had gone to the ZBA and they received a letter asking for an extension of the fence.
So we all received a copy of that today, Rachel? Did you walk in Jan to look at it?
So the fence right now is stopping here and extending to here. This neighbor has requested that it run to here in lieu of the plantings. And the plantings were done because this little piece of the property line crosses the wetlands. So I was reluctant to put the fence across the wetlands. But they really wanted it in the ZBA, so I will have to do, I'm assuming, a wetlands permit. And I wasn't sure if I should come tonight without having that revised and the wetlands permit done, but I figured I would just update everyone. And I'm still also waiting on the septic approval, final approval. The engineer resubmitted the drawings and he's waiting on the final approval.
And have you, I don't recall, you may have it already in the packet, had you selected what this privacy fence was going to be?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's in here.
Right, so it's just 1x6 boards.
And you can see through them?
There's, I think, a 1/2-inch gap between every board. The text higher up explains it. 1x6 horizontal slats, 4x4 vertical posts, and there would be a gap between each slat.
Okay. So, other than, we're waiting on the health department, the fence. I don't believe that so it's your intention to apply for a wetland permit to put the fence in, is that correct?
And that's what's required.
Yeah, so at the ZBA, what the neighbor had requested was to kind of pretty much run along the whole border, including on the rear. And what the ZBA had discussed was that what had previously been approved by the ZBA is what they really wanted to keep going. So that's what was proposed
Okay.
with that.
Okay, so
And with the addition to this new design, which Catherine explained was just a little bit more sturdy. And so that the ZBA was pretty much just keeping it in tune with what it previously had granted in 2021,
Okay.
subject to planning board's discretion.
And it goes through a buffer or a wetland?
It shows best on the septic drawing. You want to go towards the end of the packet? Okay, sorry, it was towards the beginning. So this blue shaded area is the buffer, and it wouldn't go through the wetlands. Sorry, it just goes through the buffer right here.
And we require a permit for this?
So I think Jim and I had talked about this because there's been a lot of discussion. If you look, there's actually the green line is really what the 100-foot buffer is. You can see it kind of, I think the blue is kind of where it floods or is subject to flood, but the 100-foot buffer is actually the green dot line, which kind of covers the whole border, really, except for that little corner.
So this is all running through the buffer.
Okay. And yes, a permit's required.
But it's actually subject to getting wet, right? Is that what we're hearing? The fence is subject to getting wet and it's lower.
I think that's what Jim, I think that's, is that what the blue is? The blue isn't the buffer, the blue is more of the, like a historic, I don't know if it's subject to
Wet.
I think it's close.
Anything else from planning board members?
May I just make a quick comment?
Absolutely.
So at the ZBA meeting, we held the public hearing, and Catherine had asked, because what had previously happened was that it had been a year, so the ZBA previous area variance had expired. So Catherine had asked if perhaps the ZBA would continue to hold off on issuing the resolution just until the planning board got a little bit further, but the ZBA did deliberate, and as I said, their intention is to grant the variances that had been previously granted. So just wanted to just give you an update on the ZBA that even though the resolution has not been proposed, that they are considering granting it based on their deliberations.
So we're going to continue the public hearing this evening to when, so that this all works out in terms of the timeline.
Well, I think what the ZBA was saying was that, so with the public hearing, I can't remember, I think it was closed.
It was closed, okay.
So
Your
they had.
public hearing.
The ZBA's public hearing was closed, and Catherine has granted us a mutual extension, so
I see.
we're kind of waiting until, but, so I just want.
Seeker gets done here.
Yeah, but I just wanted to just let you know that ZBA will be granting the variances, that's their intention.
But we're still waiting on the health department, so we're in a position of needing another continuation. Okay, public. Anyone here from the public wishing to comment? Any other questions from planning board members? Or could I have a motion to continue the public hearing? Michael, do you have a question?
When we continue to,
That's what's coming, that's the next. I don't know. When are we continuing to?
how does it look for the health department? I mean, I granted,
It keeps looking great and then not happening, so,
Well, that's pretty normal.
yeah.
I know that can take time sometimes, and that's, I Any comment?
John, you had a
I
comment?
was just gonna say, if you're prepared, you can prepare to move forward anyway, even if you continue the public hearing to
Sure.
the next meeting and then just close and then take action.
Okay, so let's continue to the next.
You have a
meeting.
motion on the floor.
We do, but we didn't have a date in it, that's why we're,
I was confused.
well,
Not the first time.
who made the motion? You want a motion to a particular date, John?
Yeah,
March 20th.
All right, may I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed, abstentions? Okay, we're good? We're on that?
Thank you.
You're welcome, good luck. Last up this evening, and under public hearings, is Duncanburg, 15 Bollingbecker Road, sketch plan and major subdivision.
Hi everyone, I'm Carl Duncanberg. That's Jordan Baldina, he's way down for the Aldersville subdivision. I'm very happy to be back. We've been away for a while, not least because that means that we have our 2 DEC wetlands permit, one DEC wetlands permit, one DEC general permit that we have been waiting on. They were both should be in our file now. They're both active as of now. Just to give a quick recap, this is a conservation subdivision, so while we are asking for 4 new building lots, those are dwarfed really in size by the acreage that is neither being built on nor even being touched, including this 45-acre conserved open space, which will be forever wild and guaranteed by Long Land Conservancy. That actually, I believe, is a little over 2.5 times the acreage that even the Rhinebeck zoning code requires of us, so we're proud of that. And in the intervening months since we were here last, I have, communicated with as many of you as I could and asked if there's anything else you needed from us in terms of information, and I believe we've turned in everything to date that we've been asked for, so we're hoping that we can, that we're back and move along swiftly and efficiently and bring this to a close. Thank you.
Upton, I'll let you go first. If you have any comments, questions, we'll ask for something in here.
No, I think, I've gone through my comments quite a bit in the past. As we know, as a conservation subdivision, there is a 4-step process we'll have the planning board will have to go through, essentially, proving each of those 4 steps. Before we get to any kind of approval resolution, we have to go through seeker, the short form, seeker discussion, checkbox like we did recently for the conservation subdivision. But I think Carl has addressed comments that have been asked, the questions that have been asked, these are being a big one.
Carl, one of the things that's come up that I would ask you just to refresh our memory on was the question of garbage pickup and all of those things that would be roadside if they weren't placed elsewhere. Do you want to refresh our memory on that, please?
Yes, sure. We have spoken to the 2 major local sanitation companies. Both of them may have merged since we've spoken to them, Walsh and Royal. I'm a little confused about the corporate structure, but both of them, when we spoke with them a few months ago, said that they would come into our new development of our shared drive and pick up at the private driveways, so we would not need to have any garbage pickup on Buttonwood Lane. We start now with those companies.
Didn't have anything. Questions from the planning board?
Is that also true for mail?
I've spoken with Postmaster. He has approved. At first, there was a question of whether we would have to do some sort of metal city-style mailboxes. He said, fine, cedar post, traditional sort of country, 4 black boxes on cedar post. Exact location, of course, will have to be in Buttonwood Lane because they don't go on private property. Final exact positioning will be up to them, but there's in the site plan also. Jordan did a detail of what that will look like.
Others? Okay, we have received, and I think you've all been copied, communication from some neighbors expressing again questions about parcel A and the original Buttonwood subdivision. Some time ago, actually a year ago, we ask our attorneys to look into the question that was being raised, and they did that due diligence research. And we had the question, and we did not at the time, it was sent just to planning board members, and we've asked them to come here this evening and to address that question so that we can try and answer the neighbors who raised this. And so I don't know if it's Kim or John's going to, and later, anyone in the audience who's interested, we have the full, I don't know how many page?
Well, it's 36. No. It's 9 pages with a few exhibits attached.
So it's a 9-page memorandum from council with a number of attachments supporting the conclusions that were reached by our attorney. So before we turn it over to the public, I'd like him to come up and run through the questions that have been asked and give us her conclusions.
Do you have that memo up, or do you have at least the old Skylar acreage subdivision? Might just be easier if I can show you.
It's embedded in the memo, is it not? It's embedded.
It is embedded. It's should be exhibit A. While Jim's getting that up, I can just explain a little bit. So there was a question raised as to how parcel A really should be, if it's part of the Skylar old subdivision, and that this, perhaps this conservation subdivision was kind of almost, yeah, actually this, that, go up one more? This is actually a first one. So this is based off what I had done was I had reviewed the original Skylar subdivision from 1986, and then, sorry, how do you, so this is from so this is Buttonwood, comes down here, okay? This yellow is parcel A, that's the shared driveway in question. And then this is lot 17 of Skylar Acres, which is currently owned by the Benettis. And the question again was, of course, if parcel A, if that should be made into a town road, and if it also, if this kind of basically conflicts, the Skylar Acres subdivision conflicts with any sort of restrictions against what's being proposed with this overflow subdivision. So in my review, what I found was that parcel A was actually deeded to Duncanburg. It is not part of Skylar Acres. It was deeded in 1987, and there are two restrictions that really had mentioned. You can see that there's two little map notes right here. And what these map notes say is that parcel A is to become part and parcel with other lands of Duncanburg. And again, it was deeded, and I did confirm the deed, lease and bound subscription, and the most recent 2021 deed that's current with the current property owner of Duncanburg. They do match. And then there's another note right here, which says access to over lot 17 from proposed road to be over parcel A as indicated. There's no discussion about any sort of restrictions or requirements that parcel A is to be part of, become a part of the town road. Again, it's actually not really part of the Skylar Acres. It was deeded to Duncanburg, so it is owned by them. That is confirmed by the deeds. Access from over lot 17 is to be done through this. And if you look at the deed restrictions on lot 17, which is currently owned by the Benettis, it does give them driveway access across that, but again, it doesn't require that parcel to become a town road. There's no other restrictions. I looked at other deeds throughout Skylar Acres to see if there's other restrictions that would perhaps require to be part of the town road. Nothing to that effect. So our conclusion is that parcel A is part of the Duncanburg property, and it does not need to be a town road for that purpose.
The Benettis do still have driveway access over it, so that should be, they don't lose that by any means. If it were to become a town road, they wouldn't need that access because then they would have coverage, but again, that's not being proposed here, it's not required to be proposed here. And again, this, the memo, I took out anything that was attorney-client communications, so the memo that is available to the public can be provided after the meeting.
Any board members, questions for Ken?
I wonder if it's even within the authority of the planning board to say this must be a town road. In other words, the town has to decide whether it's going to be a town road.
The town has, since Garden Rings the last one, just decided they do not want any more roads. They made that clear on a number of occasions.
I did check on that probably over a year ago now, and did confirm with town board, said they are not interested in town roads. Joe's.
Right, but even if they were, the planning board doesn't have the authority, I don't think, to say, and we say this must be a town road in our resolution, because we
You
have
can,
no
you can require that it be offered, but it's up to the town board to decide whether to accept.
I will now open it up to the public for comments and questions.
Vern Barber from Buttonwood Lane, Skylar Acres. I brought a handout with me to help illustrate my position. It's 3-phaser.
Is this the same that you sent to us, Vern?
Yes.
So we've all, I think, received it in advance.
You already have it.
I already have.
The issue of the access path, I have no objections to the development of the subdivision on the Dungenberg property. That's not the issue. The issue is a conflict between subdivisions. Okay? Alderkill is on the Dungenberg property. The access path is on a different subdivision, Skylar Acres. And let me take it back in history a little bit. In 1986, CRW developers came to the board and requested permission to build a subdivision on Miller Road. It was 23 lots, single home, private driveway on 123 acres. Okay? That's shown on your diagram there as the green outline section. That's the result was Skylar Acres. Okay? In the process of developing that subdivision, the planning board required CRW to incorporate an access path from their subdivision to the adjoining property. The adjoining property being the Dungenberg property. They complied, and if you turn to the next page in the diagram, page 2, you see a representation of that access path that we now know as Parcel A. Right? In order to create that access path, CRW developers had to take one of their lots and carve out a 50-foot wide, 383-foot long parcel out of lot 17. There are 3 lots in Skylar Acres that border the Dungenberg property. 17 was the most logical one to use. It had already had a prescribed private driveway access to Buttonwood Lane in Skylar Acres. And all parcels had private driveways. That was the premise of the entire subdivision, was single-family private driveway access. Right? If you look at the diagram, it represents the access path in parcel 17, lot 17. In order to create the access, or before I do that, as you look on the left, this 383-foot parcel, where it joins Buttonwood Lane, the 50-foot access flans out to 100 feet. 100 feet is the required town road access road to road. Right? It flares out 100 feet so they can have better access for automobiles turning in and out of the road. Okay? Driveway accesses are 50 feet. Right? If you look at the Skylar Acres map, you'll see the flag lots all have 50-foot access. Town roads have 100-foot access. So in 1986, the planning board was looking at a parcel of 141 acres to be subdivided in the future. So as a planner, the logical approach would be subdividing, developing 141 acres would need something more than a driveway. So they required CRW to incorporate in their plan a town road access to the Duncanburg property. They didn't require a driveway. They didn't require a shared driveway. They specified a town road for final approval. Okay? This diagram, by the way, is taken directly from the original 1986 Skylar Acres final plat. Okay? I have it here with me. And probably not practical to lay it out here, but yes, I can really at least you can see it. This is parcel A. It was signed December 30th, 1986, and filed with the county on January 13, 1987. Final plat. So this, what you have here is an attempt to reproduce it from this map. Shows clearly that is a road, not a driveway. It required CRW to incorporate road access. In doing so, in the reconfiguration of lot 17 to create that road access, and the reconfiguration of the property lines resulted in the inability to have an access to Skylar Acres directly from that lot. It had had its own driveway, but in reconfiguring to provide the roadway to Duncanburg, it limited the ability of lot 17 to have its driveway to the private driveway to Skylar Acres. In order to overcome that problem, if you will, in private access for that parcel, the planning board at that time specified that lot 17 would use the parcel A, the future road, as its private driveway until such time as development occurred on the Duncanburg property and the road was completed, at which time lot 17 would again have private access to a town road. It was granted town road access temporarily over that right-of-way in anticipation of the development, and when the road was complete, it would still have private access, but now on the completed road. Everybody with me? All right? The proposal now is to ignore that requirement and allow a shared driveway over that parcel. Okay? In doing so, if you prove that, what you will do is force whoever is living on lot 17, today or in the future, to give up their private property rights to a private connection to the town road and force them into a shared driveway configuration that they do not want and is not authorized by the 1986 Schuyler Acres plan. Right? The approved plan in 1986 specified a town road, not a driveway. So if you approve the shared driveway arrangement on parcel A, you are forcing a current resident of a subdivision into a shared driveway configuration by a developer on a different subdivision. Parcel A is not part of the Alderkill subdivision. Alderkill is on the Duncanburg property. The access path is on Schuyler Acres, the different subdivision. And they want you to ignore the approved subdivision requirements and let them do a shared driveway and force an existing resident that has had private access for 37 years to give that up and be forced into a shared driveway configuration they don't want. What happens if you do that? It's what I call opening Pandora's box. Everybody know what Pandora's box is? All right? For those who aren't familiar, let me read it. Pandora's box, a source of endless complications and trouble arising from a single, simple miscalculation. Guess you can bet what the miscalculation is. Right? All right. I won't be late for that. Would you go back to, oh, by the way, one more page, the back page on this, third page. The lady mentioned this in her presentation. It's the other half of that. I couldn't get it all on one page. Parcel A becomes part and parcel with other lands of Duncanburg. Okay? During the Schuyler Acres development and formal approval, I tried to buy one of those lots. And I went to the developer and I found one I wanted and I said, I'd like to buy this. And they said, you cannot do that. The developer cannot sell a parcel out of a development until after final approval. Right? So, part and parcel becomes part and parcel with other lands of Duncanburg. So yes, Duncanburg owned that. But when you buy a parcel in Schuyler Acres, you get a deed, but you also get a document called Declaration of Restrictions. When I bought my parcel, at the closing, I handed them a check, and they handed me a Declaration of Restrictions listing the things I could and could not do with that parcel. Right? In normal land sales. The buyer buys it and the property is deeded to the buyer. Right? Parcel A was deeded to Duncanburg. But when he got that deed, he also got a declaration of restrictions. And every parcel in Schuyler Acres got a declaration of restrictions. And let me just read an excerpt from you. For you. Paragraph 2. The undersigned desire to convey the said land subject to conditions and restrictions which are to run with the land and be binding. The restrictions run with the land and be binding. So if you buy a parcel out of Schuyler Acres, the restrictions come with it. Right? And if you sell it to someone else, the restrictions go with the land who the next owner is. They run with the land and are binding. So yes, they bought the land, they own it, but they also require to comply with the restrictions that came with that purchase. Right? Everybody who bought a lot in Schuyler Acres got one of these. And I'm sure Duncanburg got one also. At every closing, you got one.
Excuse me. What specific restriction are you referring to?
Okay? The requirements on parcel A to be a road. Right? They bought a parcel in Schuyler Acres. It's called parcel A. It is an integral part of that subdivision, and it required for final approval of Schuyler Acres that be a road. So you're being asked to invalidate an approved, finalized subdivision that's been in place for 37 years, ignore the requirements, and allow them to do a shared driveway on that parcel. It's not authorized in the 1986 Schuyler Acres plan. Let's assume for a minute that you go ahead and do that. The first thing that happens is the people who live on lot 17 now have to give up their private property rights to a private driveway and be forced into the shared driveway configuration they don't want, and it's not authorized. One more point and I'll get off the stage. Go back to your diagram, the opening page, the first page, and take a close look at the diagram that shows Schuyler Acres. The green part. Okay. If you look at the configuration of lots in there, it looks like a horseshoe-shaped arrangement, and parcels all kind of come together in the back. That's about a 30-acre part of land, and in the middle is a larger one. Notice the larger lot in the middle there. That's lot number 10. That's a little over 12 acres. If you vote in favor of the Alderkill subdivision and allow shared driveways on that parcel, you will be also authorizing shared driveways throughout Schuyler Acres that is a single-family private road subdivision. And the day you sign that document, the owner of lot 10 can come in here and request from you approval to build a 4-lot shared driveway subdivision on lot 10. Right? A shared driveway subdivision in the middle of a subdivision. Right?
How big is that lot?
Say again?
How big is that lot?
That lot is a little over 12 acres.
So they could divide it in two.
Pardon?
It's in a 5-acre zone, you could divide it in two.
5-acre zone.
Yes,
On Skylar Acres, they were 3-acre lots.
they were back then, when it was subdivided, that area was rezoned in 2009, it's now 5-acre minimum in the RC5 zoning district.
5-acre,
Yes.
okay? Well, even so, that breaks it down to 2 lots, you're telling me, or 3? So what I cut out a conservation subdivision where it's less.
Assuming there are no wetlands, streams, buffers, steep slopes, anything like that in there. In 5-acre zone, net density is required. All of those potential constraints are deducted from the acreage. So let's say if 2 acres in that area were about nature of those constraints, you'd be down to 10 acres that you could then subdivide. You have to have 5 acres each, 75% buildable out of water, wetlands, things of that sort. It's net density in the 5-acre zone, it's gross density in the 10 to 20 acres.
That's- I didn't catch all of that, I'm sorry.
Well, it's not necessarily all that relevant to 10 and 20. The point is that zoning has been changed since 1986. It's been changed twice, 1989 and then 2009. So the zoning has changed significantly in the time of time.
How does that affect the requirements that were approved in 86?
The problem with that is most of the lots in the old 3-acre zone, mine included, are now substandard. Although they're still considered legal building lots. If you go to build something additionally on your property, you now have to do the setbacks of a 5-acre zone rather than a 3-acre zone. And the ZBA has been quite busy dealing with variants of that sort. And I have a couple of questions maybe for John and Kim.
Let me just, we'll get to that. Gordon, did you say that was your last point?
Pardon?
Did you say that was your last point?
Yeah. Okay.
Michael?
I just had a couple of questions for John
But
and Kim.
that still does not negate the
Well, that's
fact that
what I
you're going
wanted.
to force someone out of their private driveway into a shared driveway that they don't want.
Or that private driveway on an easement that belongs to the neighboring property.
I know you guys have done research. Was there anything in the resolution of approval stating that this had to be a town road?
All right, we've got a couple of conversations going on here, and I think it's really important that the question you're asking.
Thank you for
So,
Finish one thing first and then move on.
is there something over here that you're conversing about that you should have?
I thanked him for his input, and I said I was unaware of the restriction that he had pointed out.
Yeah, I need a description of what you're talking about. You're talking about parcel A?
Yeah,
I think,
it's a little into the weeds, so.
for tonight.
uh,
Okay, you all
No,
right?
I'm not clear on that point, but that's all right, I'll get off the stage and we'll pick that up later.
Okay.
Yes, I think so.
And the question I asked, is there anything in the resolution of approval stating that parcel A had to be a town road?
No, so the resolution which is attached to my memo, so number 11, these are the conditions that were part of the planning board approval. Number 12 is I've highlighted a few again in my memo, but number 12 is kind of what really goes to parcel A.
Could you use the microphone, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I did review the 1986 planning board resolution regarding what it says for parcel A. The condition number 12 says that the applicant specifically provides a copy of the language to be provided in the deeds to lot 17 and parcel A to ensure that A, lot 17 be permitted driveway access over parcel A, and B, that lot 17 be prohibited driveway access from the proposed yet unnamed subdivision street. Now, I took that to mean
the unnamed street, and there's other discussions in that, is actually Buttonwood, it's not parcel A. Parcel A is not part of the Schuyler Acres, because if you actually see, so the 23 lot subdivision, this, when you can see on the actual subdivision map, this is 17, this is 18, this is completely separate. It's not part of Schuyler, it's actually was separately deeded out to be connected to the Duncanburg property. So again, it wasn't part of the Schuyler Acres as part of a lot to be buildable as part of that subdivision. The other part of the planning board resolution, it says that, number 14, that a change of boundary map be submitted for the lands of Duncanburg to provide for the inclusion of parcel A with Duncansburg contiguous land holdings. So again, that's saying that parcel A is deeded not as part of the subdivision, but it's deeded as part of a condition, not including anything that's part of the restrictions or covenants or anything like that. It's part of the Duncanburg land, and so therefore it's out of Schuyler subdivision as part of the Duncanburg land.
There's another point. Sure. Thank you. Back when 1986, this was a 3-acre zone, and if I'm reading this correctly, parcel A is 0.858 plus or minus acres, 91 acres. Planning board, from my understanding, has never been allowed legally to create a new lot in a zoning district that is not at least the minimum acreage of that area, minimum frontage, the different physical features of that. Clearly, this was never designed as a parcel to stand on its own. It could not be a legal lot of record.
That's my understanding.
It's
And
more or
again,
less a lot line alteration, which then required that it be immediately annexed to the Duncanburg property, since otherwise we pertain to an illegal subdivision. So therefore, it
and
was
again, there's
never.
nothing in the conditions that state that parcel A becomes a town road.
So it
And
couldn't be a separate
as
parcel.
you know from, I don't know whether you've had any recent history with a situation like this, but there are often times when a planning board will take into consideration the possibility of development on a neighboring parcel. And this is an example of a situation where the board was, thought ahead and obviously saw the possibility for development on a neighboring parcel, and allowances can be made for that possibility in the subdivision that's before them, but that doesn't compel. In other words, you're still only making a prediction as a planning board at that point. And I think it's not an exact analog, but in the Vingemer case that was in front of the board, that was another instance where that got stubbed off as the board was looking ahead. But what happens is the reason that that's not binding on the actual subdivision, because in reality, we don't know what's going to happen in the development of the lot later on in the future. And sometimes those bits that are, that sometimes that foresight works out and sometimes it doesn't, because as Michael said, the zoning lot changes over time. So, that's another reason why that's there, but it's not something that the towns or the planning board is bound. There's nothing legal that's binding you to follow through on that.
Are there any planning board questions of Ken Washington?
And again, this is all in the memo, and there's, again, attached exhibits that should be able to help show what I've looked at. But again, I did look at the resolution from 1986, I looked at the deed in 1987 that deeded parcel A to the Duncanburgs, and I have looked at the Nenny's property deed, which does discuss the access, the right-of-way access for driveway purposes, but again, nothing about a town road.
Other members of the public who wish to make a comment?
I'm Brian Letty, Senior
Before, can you pull up the, there's a aerial shot, I think it's like rendering common driveway. It's kind of, I think in the
2022.
very beginning, or once you open up the file. Anyway, again, we're not necessarily, just like Fern was saying, we're not opposed to them subdividing and building their properties, but we would just hope that it's done correctly. We want to protect our safety, our quality of life, and our property value. And if you show, there's a different one. It's like a, it's an actual picture, like a satellite picture. It's just a single shot in the file.
There's a lot of files come in, I'm not sure.
It's from
It was like a
February
stamp.
2022.
February 2022. So it was its own. It was its own. It was only one page.
It was a separate drone photo, Jim. It wasn't to scale. It was its own PDF with red lines and blue lines showing approximately where the driveway expansion would have to be. But yeah, it was like a one-page PDF. It wasn't attached to the site plan that I submitted to you guys.
I can search for it for a while, but I think it's not.
Yeah. Anyway, you know, as you search, but we had talked to Carl, within the last couple months. We walked out on the site. We tried to come up with a resolution. Carl and I talked again the other night. Up until this afternoon, I thought we were trying to work towards a compromise on resolution, and I learned in an email that we are firmly not doing that. So, my concern about the tips of the driveway, where the tips touch, that's coming off of a button thing. You'll see in that aerial shot that they provided. I haven't been able to find any driveway in the row 5 where the driveways touch, at their entrance. So it presents all sorts of problems for us. One, and I've talked about this before, egress, ingress. I'm a surgeon. I cover emergency general surgery call in the town here. I need 24/7 access. Sometimes I cover up to 2 weeks at a time. That's, hopefully not going to be a major problem. How do you, just practicality, how do you prevent the stuff that they're pouring onto the new driveway from spilling onto our driveway? How do you prevent trucks from not coming onto our driveway? It's like opening up all these, the Pandora's box. As Vern said, what if a laborer steps off the truck on our property and breaks their leg, and is that now our liability that we're taking on? It's similar, it's close to this, it's an aerial shot. You're getting closer, you're getting closer. What happens when you plow snow, and our snow pushes onto theirs, and their snow pushes onto ours? I mean, it just seems a little bit ridiculous. So, I think that shot kind of says it all. I don't, again, know of any driveways, maybe Mr. Trimble you do, that are touching, but I just kind of asked you guys if you guys had a driveway and someone came and was touching up against your driveway. It just seems a little bit difficult to work through all the potential problems that could arise from that. And that's what I would ask the board to kind of review and question and help to find a resolution.
There are actually a series of shared driveways that this board has approved over the last few years, and even prior to this board.
But shared driveways, for me, it's not shared, right? It's our property. Our property starts about 6 feet from the roadway. I don't know if you've been out to that site, but the driveway starts about 6 feet from the street. So, this shot right here. So it's kind of just proposing to touch. So I think if you came, maybe I'll use it. If you came straight here, it kind of eliminates all those problems. This is where all the trees are, actually. All of this is like that dead stuff that grows in a wetland. So, again, this would basically make it a lot less of a problem, I think, going into the future in terms of trespass, in terms of liability, in terms of safety, in terms of practicality.
Are you speaking to the town road, or are you speaking to the driveway itself?
I'm talking about driveway. But as proposed right now, it's just touching. It's like building off our driveway. So I'm talking about if you're going to approve a shared driveway, make it its own driveway instead of building off of our land. Also, I still, and maybe Carl, you can speak to this, I haven't seen the formal agreement with the conservation, the conservancy, the land conservancy. Thanks.
Public comment?
Victoria Polidoro here on behalf of the amendments. I just wanted to take this opportunity. I know the board has looked at this before, but just to be clear, the red line is their property. So when a car pulls in naturally and makes a right-hand turn, it sticks as far to the right as possible. And so when he talks about the trespass issue, the question really is, how do you have a truck turn in here? It's automatically going to go here and use this portion of the driveway, because there's not any real boundary on the ground saying trucks have to go up and over, right? You can't put a fence here because it will prohibit them from going up. So I think we're talking about the realities of having this driveway on both properties. And we were hoping that we would be able to come to a resolution with the neighbors. There have been discussions. At this point, it hasn't happened. So in the absence of that, you know, you don't want the planning board to approve a plan that's automatically going to result in property trespass, right here. I mean, you're gonna turn in, boom, and as they said, if the construction vehicles turn in and get in an accident here, if they start digging up and create holes here, there's nothing, there's no recompense to the Benettis because this is not the land that's being developed. So this is what we're trying to work through. You know, we're asking for the planning board's assistance in trying to come to a resolution. The other issue that I do want to bring up is we did see that there's a draft resolution prepared. Can you pull up the subdivision? Do you want to? Two issues. One, we did not see that the subdivision approval was conditioned on them actually executing the conservation easement, and since it's a conservation subdivision, we would hope.
So I always draft an approval resolution for the first public hearing, just by default, so it has just very basic information that's there. They almost always get, not almost always, but very often will get edited and changed. That's just there as a draft for initial consideration, so we have it at the first public hearing, should we decide to move forward. That is not planning and saying that's going to be the final approval resolution. That's just kind of a placeholder.
Okay, understood. We just want to make sure that any approval actually requires them to follow through with the conservation organization and execute those conservation reports. And the other issue, once the driveway's up, there's a driveway to this lot here, and I don't know if you can make it a little bit bigger. There's actually two issues. You know, obviously, Mr. Dunberg has a right to develop his lot, he has a right to subdivide, and he's conserving a whole lot of land. But the detriment over here to these landowners is that all the development is being squished right by their property line in order to conserve this large area of open space. And so there's two questions here. One is this amount of tree removal and impervious for this big circular driveway, it feels a little overkill, and we're just questioning whether a lighter touch could be had by maybe, you know, just the driveway without a driveway circle here. This is their house here. And then second, there's a row of trees here along the shared property boundary. And we asked, I don't know if the planning board has been out on a site walk of this area, but it seems possible to scooch the driveway over a little and put some kind of restriction on removal of these trees so that they can capture a few more of the natural boundary and buffer by just moving the driveway over slightly. Because this whole area is going to be deleted anyways in order to put in the septic and build the house lots. So just trying to create more of a buffer here and save some of those trees. So those are the two things we're going to ask the planning board to consider tonight, in addition to trying to solve this issue. Thank you for your time.
Victoria?
Yes.
Where does the Benetti's current driveway join the drive, you know, the piece of property?
There's I think it's sheet C6 or something, Jim.
It's right here.
Like
That's
that?
useful.
It's a shared driveway,
So
fully right now, up to this point.
Okay, so since that's.
It's only the Benettis using it.
Why can't there not be a fence then at the end there between the Benetti property and then the shared driveway?
Because this portion of the Benetti's drive, this here, so as you learned from the recitation of the history of the project, the driveway was all supposed to be on this property. And as it was constructed, it ended up not being there. I don't know whose fault that was, but this is what we're working with now. So if you put a fence here, that's actually Duncanburg's property. So
What if that can be done, and it protects the Nettie property from anyone trespassing,
That-
not driving over it or anything like that?
that would be an option to consider. You have to see what it looked like.
Bollards, any number of things that would prevent, and anyone does it, the vehicle probably will suffer from it and property.
Sure, I mean, if that's something, we could look at that proposal.
Rather than resolve that problem at the end.
During the width of the driveway, it would be just on parcel A is wide enough for full driveway access. So
Yes.
if we were to remove parcel, if the driveway portion of the Benetti property would be removed entirely, we still have full width driveway.
Yes.
So that might be another option to consider.
We have no intention or need, that's the whole point of this plan, to use the Benetti property for anything. And they, as we all know and have been over and over, have a right way for driveway access over anything I built within this, what was previously parcel A. So they would have the right to only use our shared driveway and do anything they wanted with the portion they're concerned with.
And that's through an existing agreement that they have right now for that driveway over parcel A, which will be incorporated into the agreement that you submitted to us for the new agreement, which will take place with this, so that the old one will still remain.
Runs into perpetuity.
Runs into perpetuity.
Yes.
So could you show how that would change this, if that were to happen that
I
way?
feel a little uncomfortable suggesting what the Benetti should do with their own land. It's really not my business.
I'll put it.
Okay.
So this black line is the parcel line, right there where my cursor is. The existing driveway right now is essentially going over the Nettie property here in the area of Clay.
And the shape.
So the existing driveway is kind of running through this area. So this is the parcel line for the Netties. And so what I just asked Julie is if this width here is adequate for the actual width of the driveway, should say this be abandoned? Or is another option was to say put a fence in here to keep people off of that part of the property? I think there are options that can be considered to resolve the issue, but right now, the driveway does run over this part, and then it goes completely on parcel A. Right at this point.
So in that case, the Netties would be using the other driveway all the way to Buttonwood.
In its entirety.
Yeah.
For which they have an agreement. Will have an
Yeah,
agreement.
so why wouldn't you want to do that? Would
Well,
that make
why do
sense?
we have to enter into a shared driveway agreement? Are we legally bound to do that?
No. Well, actually, one of the restrictions from the 1986 was that the Benetti, the lot 17, which is currently owned by Benetti, does not have direct access to Buttonwood, and it was supposed to be always shared over parcel A, which is what is currently owned by the Duncanburg. So, again, I don't know how this driveway was designed, and who did it, but it really should, the whole Benetti access should be through parcel A by way of a right-of-way for driveway access. So it's actually, the driveway shouldn't even be on the next property. It is, and that is what it is, but that is actually a restriction and a condition, was that the Benettis would not have their own driveway and would use parcel A.
Can I just clarify, because these lines that show going through Duncanburg and parcel A and then turning, beyond the shaded little strip there, that's where still that whole length is the Benetti access, or has it been the whole length? So the shared driveway you're talking about is from Buttonwood all the way to the curve,
Correct.
which is how far?
What, sorry, that's.
What is that length?
Several hundred feet.
So you couldn't actually put a fence all the way up to there, could you? Is that
No, no,
right?
Wait, no, that's all on my property. The part that Victoria was just pointing out.
The
is
thick
all on-
black.
We have like
the thick black
50
line.
feet of it is ours. 50 feet is completely ours.
This is the edge of Duncanburg's property here.
Yeah.
This is this little sliver here. I'm not trying to minimize it, by the way. And this, in
That's
context.
the current driveway.
This
driveway.
is, no, but this strip here, between these two lines, is the piece of the driveway that's on the Benetti's
And
property.
the rest is now on the other side.
The rest is on Duncanburg.
And the Benetti's driveway now goes on towards that green area.
On Duncanburg's, yeah, this part of it is not on Duncanburg's, just right here.
Yeah.
and then it is on Duncan Burke.
First 70 feet.
First 70 feet. Just-
Yeah, and part of the entrance off the road is also on Duncan Burke.
So presumably there is enough for a fence, or, well, I understand this might not be something anyone wants to do. Also, there's enough room, land ownership has to move that little 70 feet if agreeable. Just conceptually. Conceptually, I mean, it could all be moved onto Duncanburg's property. I think that's not an issue. I guess another thing for the board to consider would be removing the restriction that would allow the Benettis to put in their own driveway at some point. I mean, there's a ton of frontage on Buttonwood, and if they were able to get their own driveway, it might resolve a future, if this ends up being a dispute over the long term, that might be one way to handle it, if they have their own driveway. But yeah, so I'm not sure, I mean, we have to look, I'm not sure if fence would work, because it would have to just be for a portion, because then it has to go on to the.
But you could turn it into grass, with a stone edge, so it would be part of the property, would make that driveway look less wide, which would be lovely for the neighborhood.
And it could also maybe be a scale
Right,
or
so
something that's.
you're saying reclaim the Benetti property and just move the entirety of the driveway onto
Yeah.
Duncanburg. What is the restriction, just to be refresh? So, Ms. Garrison went over it a little while ago, but when this subdivision was approved originally, I believe there was an intention for that to be a road at some point. And so the access was supposed to be off of that instead of Buttonwood.
Victor, that's a deed restriction, right?
Was it a deed restriction, or I thought it was a condition?
It's in the, so there's a thing in the 1986 resolution that approved the Schuyler acres, which is, that's where the restriction is that they would be using this parcel A to access Buttonwood. Lot 17 would be accessing Buttonwood. In the current deed, it grants them the perpetual right-of-way over Duncanburg property. Duncanburg simultaneously has that provision saying that Lot 17 has access over that portion.
So when an approval resolution, the planning board could potentially address that item, but the planning board cannot address a deed restriction, as I understand.
I don't understand it to be a deed restriction.
No, right, but so that's what I'm saying, so if
There's
it's
a
in
deed
the.
granting them access way.
Right, but if it's in the approval resolution, that is an item the planning board could consider. Yes.
Yeah, the prohibition for the Benettis to be using their own driveway is in the 1986 resolution.
So that's in the realm of something we could talk about.
I think there's another, the bottom line is the town will not accept any more votes. They will not read up the third. They make that adamantly apparent to us.
Our zoning law also doesn't really ask for a town road. Our zoning law asks for the lowest impact
So there's that
item
too.
that's there, and that specifically relates to the conservation subdivision as well.
Exactly, but a town road is, it's our request, the town will not accept it. It's not a free road, therefore it does not serve all the residents of the Rhinebeck.
Does anyone actually want a town road? The town doesn't want it, and Duncanburg doesn't want it.
Buttonwood does.
Buttonwood does. Buttonwood wants it to be a town road, yes, very much so. Okay, but is Buttonwood a party to this? I mean,
I can go sit down.
thank you.
Yes. Joe?
But can we go back to that driveway picture? The picture of the Benetti lot line with the driveway and the roof in there. Yeah, so, when we bought our, I'm an original owner on Buttonwood Lane. When we bought it, it was planned and laid out to be a town road. All the provisions were there for a town road. The reason the Benetti's access to Buttonwood Lane was removed as part of the resolution approving Schuyler Acres was because you can't run a driveway alongside of a town road. Okay, you can't run those tunnels. So that's one of the reasons it was taken out. The other thing, because it was supposed to be a town road with a 100-foot opening on Buttonwood instead of a 50-foot opening. So, and the words in there are very easy to interpret that this was supposed to be a town road. Now, given that you're telling me it can't be a town road today, like the world has changed and we can't make it a town road, we can still insist that it's a driveway as good as a town road. Now, the way that this is proposed here, by not finding some arrangement with the Benettis, which I think they worked very hard to make accommodations, we're gonna cut down a huge buttonwood tree and we're gonna fill in a chunk of wetlands here. And the application for that says that that cutting and that filling is because it's required. Well, it's not required, it's preferred. Huge difference from a legal standpoint, whether something is required or preferred. We would like to find a solution where this is not filled in, okay? We don't lose more of our wetlands on Buttonwood Lane. We don't knock down the namesake Buttonwood tree that's standing in there. We don't lose all of that. And we get a road-like driveway, at least here, where we don't have vehicles backing out onto Buttonwood Lane because the driveways aren't wide enough to pass. We don't have five family driveways inside of Skylar Acres because it wasn't a conservation subdivision when it was built. It's not supposed to be a 5-family driveway there. 4 was the limit. At least we can put in a good driveway here that allows vehicles to pass and not back out on the Buttonwood Lane and create safety issues. Now, I'll disagree with the attorney about whether parcel A is part of Buttonwood or Skylar Acres or not, because, I can take you through the timeline here, but the timeline's very clear. Skylar Acres was done in January. The deed did not transfer in January. The Duncanburg filing is in March. So the property did not transfer out of Skylar Acres before Skylar Acres was made a final plat. All right? When you look at the final plat, the Duncanburg property is still in there shown as part of Skylar Acres. It's not shown as a separate plat. So the argument this is separate is a crazy argument. When you deconstruct the timeline, you go through the documents, you'll find that. Will we get a copy of this 9-page memorandum?
Here.
Okay, will that be posted on the site, or?
I think Gretchen will, you know,
Post
typically.
it, but I can email them to anybody that requests
Anybody
it,
that
or
there's-
there's copies for people to
There are
take
6
again.
here tonight of the
Okay.
complete document, and anybody who's additionally wanting them can either email Gretchen and ask her to prepare a hard copy, or she can email it to you.
Okay. Yeah, because when you go through the timeline, it's important that you remember, Skylar Acres has a map dated August. The resolution for Skylar Acres was approved on October 6th of 1986. The map was updated on October 6th to show the language that the planning board required so that this could become a town road when it was developed. It also challenged the developer to come up with a way to make sure that parcel A never transferred separately from Duncan. The intent was that parcel A always be tied to the big lot behind it so that nobody could prevent or hold hostage the ability to put a town road there, because if you remember in the late 1980s, what was the development hot button in Rhinebeck? Right? No single access developments and no cul-de-sacs. Right? And they wanted to guarantee that there was a road, there was a possibility to put a road here when Duncanburg came to develop and put that road through all the way to Bolenbecker. That was the goal of the planning board and why they wanted that roadway there, because they didn't want 2 more cul-de-sacs and they didn't want more dead-end development or single-entry development. If you go back through the planning board minutes, it's all over the place that that was their hot button item. And that's why the planning board wanted parcel A to become a town road someday. So there is history here. The story hangs together. All of the timeline supports it. I understand life changes and we're on to town, no town roads now, and cul-de-sacs and single entry developments are okay. But that doesn't mean that we can't do this driveway a lot better so that it's not a burden on the residents of Buttonwood Lane. From a process standpoint, will we have a chance to come back and talk about the 9-page memo?
We'll decide that as we draw to a conclusion this evening. We're gonna, I'm gonna ask for obviously some direction from our attorneys.
Okay, I'd request a chance to do that, because I thought I had all the information posted that we were gonna speak about tonight, and obviously that's important information to digest and figure out how that meshes against the data that I pulled through different research, so. All right, thank you.
Other members of the public?
My name is Ray Bouchard. I'm at 22 Buttonwood Lane. I submitted a letter and I haven't heard a response on how does that go about finding out the answers to my question.
Well, perhaps if you ask the questions right now, we'll perhaps be able to answer them.
Okay,
Generally, when a letter comes in, we take it up at the meeting and don't respond directly to anybody who writes any question. So if you want
so there was prior letters sent and I didn't receive a response on that either, so I have to bring them up at the meeting. Is that the procedure?
Well, I guess I would say it's the best place to raise your question, because then we have the ability to respond to you as a group, and we're here tonight, so please go ahead and share with us your concerns.
Now, the conservation area, as I read it in your comprehensive plan, 187 pages, was that on two items that are specified, the rules say it's going to be for hiking, biking, and walking. Is that going to happen in this subdivision?
Carl, do you want to speak to where you are with the holder of your conservation easement?
Yes, they're making no requirements of me in terms of access, and I have no intention of making it public property or putting in parking lots or parking areas as you seem to be concerned about. That was an item I believe suggested in the comprehensive plan from 2009, but it is certainly not part of the zoning code or a requirement of the conservation section.
So this conservation is not subject to the comprehensive plan. Is that what I'm getting?
I don't feel I should be commenting on the difference between a comprehensive plan and zoning code, but as I understand them, they're two different things. One is enforceable and one is a suggestion for how a town goes forward with development in the future. Do I have that right?
Yes.
John, would you?
Well, basically, the comprehensive plan does set forth the town's vision and goals for development. The zoning law is the way that that's implemented. The law does not require the zoning law and the comprehensive plan to be synchronized exactly. There's discretion that's given to the town board when enacting the zoning law to it has to be in accord with the comprehensive plan generally.
So I'm subject to viewing out my kitchen window, no trespassing signs. And I take it, I can't go on that property at all because of your signs, correct?
Yeah, during construction, we felt it necessary to post our.
Are you on
That's
construction?
correct. Well, yes, we've been beginning to do defaults in order to figure out where septic systems go by the Department of Health. And my attorney, sadly, informed us after 40 years of allowing neighbor traffic and as well as the Lansing Hill Trail Association, whom we still allow to ride on the property as long as we know in advance and can make sure it's safe. But our attorney unfortunately told us that at least during construction we need to be
So
safe
once
about.
construction's done, signs come off?
I couldn't tell you at this time, no.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you about anyone
That was
else's no trespassing
no.
signs on Buttonwood Lane either, Mr. Bouchard.
All right, thank you very much.
The members of the public. Anything else from the planning board members? John, I would ask you perhaps to provide us your wisdom and what the next steps might be.
Is the public hearing still open?
Yes.
It is at the moment.
Okay, well, I would suggest that you continue the public hearing for one more meeting in case there's anybody that wants to provide comment on the memo that our firm provided to the planning board. And it's up to the board what you want to do in terms of, if anything, about approaching some of the suggestions that have been made about the driveway.
into the secret.
I do want to run through the 4 steps.
Right, we have to go through the 4 steps in seeker, but seeker is it's the simple form, it's not a
Yeah.
long, multiple hour discussion.
It's not.
We'll have a couple of those this year, but it's not.
May I ask a question regarding seeker? We wanted to conclude tonight with our DEC approval, which we had prior to submitting this, a full application, which is what it needs to be to the Department of Health. And I know this is a common thing, they're saying, is there a seeker determination? So I don't think that holds up submitting to the Department of Health, but I just wanted to understand how that can synchronize the most effectively. Because you'll probably be looking for Department of Health approval at the right moment.
Yes.
Right. So I guess it's a question. So I submit to them and say no secret determination yet because the public hearing is being held open.
They can
So-
certainly start the review, they can certainly do that, but they're going to require the secret determination from the school.
I see.
They can give you a fine,
Right. They can start their review, but it'll be a condition or et cetera.
and it takes them a while.
Yeah, yes it does. Yep. Okay, thanks.
I believe we have it's been suggested that we continue the public hearing.
Yeah.
Next month.
That's what we did.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Anyone want to question? I just have one,
Yeah.
Craig
did.
and Michael second.
Oh, I did.
Just for the record, Gretchen, and I couldn't find the date, we received a request today to continue Rockledge.
Yes.
Let's get that on the record so
We'll
that.
have to announce the next one too. We'll have to announce the next one too, because they're
Right,
scheduled for
so
that.
refresh my memory, I've forgotten.
April 3rd.
Okay, so there's been a request received to continue the public hearing on Rockledge from the date that was scheduled, which was
March 6th.
March 6th to April
3rd.
3rd. So I'll need a motion to continue that. Michael, second, Edna, all those in favor? Opposed, abstentions? Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your courtesy. And thank you for being willing to listen to other people's opinions and views. So with that, I wish you all a good evening. We have a motion to
So moved.